It is really an honor to be here, and I'm very happy to be sharing this evening with you. And I'm hoping to give you some thoughts in the Quran about actually what I thought was a simple subject, but the more I started looking into it, it's actually a pretty deep subject, youth in the Quran and how Allah addresses that subject. I'll share some thoughts with you about that today. But actually, even as I was thinking about what to share with you today, I realized this should be a series, not just one talk. Just on youth in the Quran, because it is something that is just that important. There is a tendency in the age of data, right? We are in the age of data, and everything's been digitized. Even the Quran has been digitized. Many of us, including myself, read the Quran off of apps on our phone, and we can do word searches on the Quran or all kinds of stuff, right? And in that kind of age, it's very easy for us to look at things in a quantitative way, like how many times does this word occur, or how many ayat reference this, or how many hadith are about this, etc., right? And that's all quantity, isn't it? And when you become so accustomed to quantity, you start losing sight of quality, right? So you're just like, oh, this is where this came this many times, or these many words, or these many ayat, or these many stories, etc. And we just become comfortable with the surface kind of reading of what Allah has given us, instead of stopping at every one of those places and saying, this is a unique gift from Allah. It's not just a statistic, right? It's not just, it just happens to be a word that occurred. And this is, I find, because I came originally from a tech background, I was very excited when, the digital transformation of the world was also impacting Islamic studies. Many of the tafasir that I study, I would never have had access to them if it wasn't for the digital transformation, right? So now I can look up multiple, maybe 20, 30 tafasir on a single ayah just off of a few taps of fingers. Something that was like, this would take years of travel for somebody a few centuries ago to have access to the works, the life work of those ulama in one place the way that we have now, right? But because of that, we're almost hypnotized. But yeah, so because we're in the age of data, I realized in myself some time ago, this is a few years ago, I think I'm looking at Islamic studies too artificially. I'm not putting enough time and effort into the quality as opposed to the quantity of what Allah is saying, right? And that's why, even though I could give you stats today too, this is the word youth has occurred, or its derivatives have occurred this many times in the Quran, these are the stories that mention it, etc., etc., etc. That is not what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to you about a few important observations about what Allah has done in the Quran to talk about any subject, and in this case it happens to be youth. And the place I want to begin is actually the meanings of the word youth, or the word that Allah chose particularly to talk about youth. And the word originates from the term futuwa in the Arabic language. So the origin is argued as fa, ta, and waw, or fa, ta, and ya. It's ibdal. So there's some argument about whether the last letter is a waw or a ya. But regardless, this word actually in Arabic, it has to do with generosity, it has to do with seriousness, it has to do with strength, it has to do with noble qualities and dignity and decency. It also has to do with mature decision making and real clarity. For example, in Arabic, way before Islam, the Arabs would say, for example, I'm never going to do that. You know how you say, I'll never do it, right? They would say, لا أفعله ما اختلف الفتيان. I'm never going to do this so long as the fatayan, the fata is the singular, the two fata are different from each other. What are the two fata? They meant يعنون بذلك الليل والنهار. So the night and day were actually, each of them were called a fata, right? We use that word to, in easy translation of Quran, we use that word to describe youth. And the old Arabs were using this word to describe something that's distinctly different from something else. And in it, there's a little bit of a philosophy about what the Arabs thought about youth. It is an age that distinguishes human beings from any other age. It is the bridge between childhood and adulthood, right? It's the most pivotal. Like if there's a tent being held up by the middle column or that pillar, the pitch, right? This is the pitch. It separates the two sides, right? And it's strategically important for us to have. Before Islam, the Arabs were thinking about youth as actually a very strong stage, a strong moment in the life of a human being, where they reach the best of their qualities. Now, the thing is, interestingly, in the modern age, we think of youth as a time of vulnerability. These impressionable youth. Our youth are the subject of, lots of influences. How do you survive living in the modern world as a vulnerable youth? And our youth are being influenced by this or that or the other. And the youth and the drug problem, and the youth and the alcohol problem, and the youth and the gang problem, and the youth and depression, and the youth and suicide. Youth problem, youth problem, youth problem, right? And if you're too young, you can't handle responsibility because you're just a youth, right? And there's entire machinery in place, because the things that are put in place in the modern world, they're not in place because somebody has an agenda against Islam. They have an agenda for making money. So all the big movements that exist in the world today that influence the world, they exist for capitalistic reasons, right? And one of the most amazing capitalistic markets, one of the most great market segments is young people, right? So marketing agencies want to get you when you're young so that you remain addicted to certain things. Like, for example, when I was young in 1875, there was a marketing strategy to get young people involved in video games, right? More and more. And I'm still a gamer, but that's because of the addiction that was created a really long time ago, you understand? So there's actually, focus groups. Those of you that are in the field of marketing or advertising, those of you that are in the tech industry, especially in the social media agencies, they actually have focus groups dedicated to how do I keep an 8-year-old on the screen, and how do I develop a funnel by the time they're 16, 17, 18, they remain on the screen, and they remain consuming our product. And the reason I'm mentioning that here is because this is a very strategic effort to make sure that young people who are actually immature, kids that are actually not yet physically mature and even mentally mature yet, they're still impressionable, they never actually properly grow out of that stage, and you can suggest anything to them and they'll just do it, right? So we keep grooming them to remain children. We keep grooming boys to remain boys, and we keep grooming girls to remain girls instead of them ever becoming men and women. Right? Them becoming strong and generous and leaders and decision makers and brave. They never reach futuwa. They never reach that. Interestingly, one of the highest qualifications a Muslim scholar can have in the realm of jurisprudence and fiqh is that they can become a mufti and they can do ifta. And ifta itself comes from futuwa. So you understand that there's actually an etymological connection between the ability to make a really mature, well thought out decision, which is what a fatwa is, right? Somebody did their homework, they did their research, they looked at all the aspects, the historical aspects, the current aspects, the riwayah, the diraya, they looked at all of that and they made a conclusion about this is what the Islamic position is. That's what a fatwa is, right? And that fatwa is actually from the word futuwa, which is from the word youth. Right? It comes from that word, which is why, interestingly, another study, and maybe in another lecture I'll talk about this, in the Islamic tradition, mufassirun, fuqaha, people that were on the kalam side of things, people on the tasawwuf side of things, all of them had discussed what is futuwa, what is this, what is youth, how do we define it? And if you look at their definitions, there's many of them, but one thing you find in common in all of them, it's the best qualities a human being can have. Some would say, someone who's a true fata is someone who is just as generous when they're giving food to their enemy than when they're giving food to their friend. That's a fata. Well, Al-Asbahani said this in his writings on what is a fata, right? Someone who does not shift with a trend, and their commitment to Allah and His Messenger remains the same in victory and in loss. This is a fata. In other words, the youth in the Islamic tradition, we're not even touching Quran yet, but just based on the word and how Allah talks about them, the youth are people, they don't follow trends, they create trends. They don't fall into, everybody's doing it, I gotta do it too. Everybody's wearing these shoes, I gotta wear these shoes. Everybody's becoming an influencer, and under the influence, I wanna become an influencer too. Everybody's making these kinds of videos. They're getting this kind of camera. They're using this kind of lighting. They're using this filter. And I need to do that too. For Islam. Then you're sheep. Then you may be shabab, That's fine, right? But you're not a fata. You're a shab, but you're not a fata. There's the difference between the two. So now having said that, let's turn, inshallah, for a little bit to the Quran and some drizzle, some insights that we can get from how Allah discusses this subject. I think the premise or the prerequisite to understand this subject is important. So I'll take 5 minutes to give you the prerequisite. And the prerequisite is Allah is very selective in what He chose to tell us in the Quran. The Quran is actually an extremely brief book. It's not an exhaustive book in terms of quantity. It's endless in terms of quality, but it's actually very limited in terms of quantity. 114 surahs are not very many. And many of those surahs are like 3 of them on a page, right? Or they're just a handful of pages. Most surahs are shorter than a research paper PDF. You understand that? So the Quran is actually extremely brief. If you look at it for a 23-year revelation, it's extremely, extremely brief, right? Which means Allah is extremely selective about every single ayah that He chose to make part of the final revelation. And every word in the Quran is a selection out of endless words that could have been chosen. So the first place, and that's the benchmark place because it's the story of the youth, is Ashabul Kahf. It's not the only place, but I just want to highlight one thing from there. I'll start here and I'll end here also. And I'll go to other places in between. Allah mentions, just by mentioning Ashabul Kahf in the opening ayah of the story in Surah Al-Kahf, it's interesting, He mentioned Ashabul Kahf right after He mentioned, Inna ja'alna ma'ala al-ardi zinatan laha. We made whatever's on the earth as a beautification for it, to test people, right? And then He mentioned young people who were not, seduced by the beauty of the world, right? And if you look at marketing trends now, social media trends now, what are youth? What youth content, teenage content, 20-somethings content? What are they putting out in the world? What are they not just what are they producing? What are they viewing? A lot of it has to do with beauty, cars, fashion, bodybuilding, fashion, makeup, right? Beautiful places to go to, right? It's in one way or the other. There's this obsession with material beauty that's being highlighted and pushed upon youth. In fact, there's studies on young girls that are going into deep depression because they watch so much social media. They realize I have too many freckles, or my skin is too dark, or it's too pale, or it's too this. I need to use bleach or something to, or just scrape the skin off and get a new one. And I need to get this surgery and that surgery. My nose is too big and my eyes are too far apart. If somebody has a nail and a hammer to, adjust them, and my lips and my ears and my this, and you start seeing problems in yourself you never saw before. Why? Because there's this hyper comparison. And why is that being done? Because it's pushing a certain industry, isn't it? Right? Now 8-year-old girls know all about which filter to use and which makeup brand to use and which filler to use and all of that stuff, right? Obsessed with it. But why is that happening? Because there's an obsession with beauty. And Allah says in this remarkable ayah, He says, whatever He made in this world as a beautification was there to test people. Who's going to come out on top? Who's going to be best in terms of deed? And right after He says that He's going to reduce the world to nothing, basically, slipping mud, sa'idan juruza. After He does that, then He mentions, by the way, did you think about Ashabul Kahf? Aren't they one of my unique examples? Min ayatina ajaba. It's as if Allah is saying that He, through this revelation and through faith, Allah is able to empower young people in a way that most people are not able to find that kind of strength. They can only find that inside this faith. And that's why there's this concept in Arabic and in rhetoric. It's easy to understand even in English. It's famously known as al-idhar fi maqam al-idmar. What that means is, when you say a noun, then after that you say a pronoun. Let me give you a simple example. Once upon a time, there was a farmer. He went to the market. Who's he? The farmer. I didn't say the farmer, I said he. How did you know it's the farmer? Because I just mentioned the farmer first. So the moment the farmer is the noun and he is the pronoun. So the moment I use the pronoun, you already know it goes back to the noun. And I don't have to say, once upon a time there was a farmer, the farmer went to the market. I don't do that.
It's unnecessary. Naturally, in every language, once you use a noun, what do you switch over to? The pronoun. Okay, keep that in mind. أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا. Did you ever realize about the people of the cave? أصحاب الكهف. That's a noun or a pronoun? The people of the cave. That's a noun. Next ayah. إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف. Allah didn't say إذ أووا إلى الكهف. He didn't say when they went to the cave. If Allah said when they went to the cave, who would He be talking about? He'd be talking about Ashab al-Kahf. We expect in natural language that should be a pronoun. What did Allah say? إِذْ أَوَى الْفِتْيَةُ إِلَى الْكَهْفِ. When the youth went to the cave. The youth went. He didn't use a pronoun, he used a noun. Now the question is, this is unusual, right? And the Qur'an's language is flooded with the unusual. And every time something unusual is there, it's supposed to make you curious. Or it's supposed to at least make you stop and say, hey, wait, that's not what I was expecting. This is something else. Right? Now Allah already mentioned two names for them. People of the cave and youth. Yeah? 2 times. But now that's been mentioned. And then He starts talking about their story in the opening. And then He comes again and says, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. They were young people. Wait, but did He already tell us they were young people? He did. And He said it again. What is Allah doing here? I told you, every word is selective. And the Quran rejects so much history, rejects so much others that didn't make its way into the Quran. Allah is very selective about every word, and He chose to mention the fact that these were young people multiple times, when if He never mentioned it, we would have understood the story anyway. Which means this is Allah's way of telling us that their age is of pivotal importance in understanding this story. It's of crucial importance. Now let's think for a moment about the cave before we go elsewhere. A cave is a place away from civilization. You don't have in Chicago, in this neighborhood, two doors down or 2 blocks down, a cave. You can have a man cave, which most of the time is a boy cave, let's be honest. All right, it's got a PS5, it's got a couple action figures. But a cave is out in the wilderness. A cave is away from civilization. A cave is not some place you go to for comfort. A cave is also not some place you go and show off. Check out my cave. Check out these rocks over here. That one's really jagged. Look at this cut. I got that from I was sleeping on it. No, you don't do that. A cave is disconnection. And when something is in a cave, you can't even see it. The cave, the story everybody knows, but it represents something. It represents an alienation from the larger society. These young people were willing to cut themselves off from civilization. Something was so powerful that instead of being drowned in their society, drowned in the trends, drowned in the pressure, when young people come up to me and say, Ustadh Nouman, it's so hard to be Muslim in America, there's so much pressure. I'm like, oh, you want me to get you a little milk? Lactose intolerant? I'll get you lactose-free milk. What religion do you think you're following? These young people said, you know what, we're young. And a cave is usually not on the first floor, if you know what I mean. Where's the cave? It requires a great deal of strength, resilience, fortitude. It requires grit and stamina, physical and mental. And it's not in a safe place. So it requires a great deal of bravery and risk-taking to go to a cave. And if you told your mom, hey mom, gonna go to the cave way up there with my buddies, what's she gonna say? Right? I'll show you cave. Right? You don't go there with permission. You go there as an act of rebellion, don't you? You can't just go to a cave like a casual thing. And to make that decision is actually something you decided to put your life at risk to go to a cave. You decided to cut yourself off from the world to go to a cave. You made some very serious moves based on something must be there, something more powerful than any trend, something more powerful than feeling accepted, feeling wanted, feeling valued, judging your value based on how others see you. None of that matters because you're heading to a cave. Because anybody who sees you, where are you going? Oh, up in the cave. Stupid. We're going to go to a cave. Go to college. Go get a job. Why are you going to a cave? What is Allah teaching us through this story? These young men represent the firmness of decision in which they are willing to stand by what they believe, and if the society in which they live is really ready to kill them for what they believe, then they had two options. They could be, and they're smart too. So they could be, oh yeah, if you want to kill us, we're just going to be shaheed. Do it. Do it. I'm just going to go to Jannah anyway, bro. Come on guys, takbir. No. They said, look, if we stay here, we're going to get killed. Or we could stay here and be safe if we just compromise on our faith. Or we need to have an exit strategy. And what did they choose? An exit strategy. They didn't choose dying. They didn't choose fighting. They didn't choose sacrificing themselves. They chose a tough option, but still the smartest of the tough options. What did they choose? Something intelligent and something that doesn't compromise their principles. What do you find among young people today? There are people that say you need to be smart, and what they mean by that is you need to compromise. Did they compromise? No. Or they say, no, you can't compromise. You need to be loyal to Allah and His Messenger, and they tend to be suicidal, or self-destructive, or antagonistic for no reason. The only way to be loyal to Islam is to be hardcore. I'm hardcore, bro, bring it. Let the kuffar come. Both of these reflect a lack of futuwa. A lack of futuwa. When Allah says, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ, they did something that represents the height of maturity and the height of commitment to their principles. We have to learn what that means in our time. That's the model Allah has set for us. Now, I won't talk too much about them. I'll give you some other glimpses from some other places in the Quran to keep the conversation going, inshallah. Another thing I want to share with you is fata in the Arabic language, especially when it comes as an idafa, fatahu, fataha, right? Or fityanihi, for example. This was used for servants, slaves or servants. So, Zulaykha had Yusuf alayhi salam as her personal servant in Surah Yusuf. And Allah described her or him as fataha, her fata. Her fata meaning her servant. Musa alayhi salam went on a journey, right? And then where he met someone who he wanted to learn from, right? And he's where the two oceans meet. And he took his fata with him. Same surah, right? إِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِي فَتَاهُ, right? So that in that case, it's a servant. Similarly, Yusuf alayhi salam, later on in the story, it's interesting, the word fata is used in two iterations in Al-Kahf, and it's also used in two iterations in Surah Yusuf. And in Surah Yusuf later on, when his brothers came in front of him and he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him, he told his servants to fill their bags with goods. وَقَالَ لِفِتْيَانِهِ. He told his young servants to go fill the bags, okay? So the point I'm making is in all three of these cases, the word fata is coming in the meaning of servant. Let's put that in modern terms. It's like an employer, okay? Or it's almost like a mentor or a trainer, right? That you're under, or a coach even. You can think of Musa alayhi salam and Yusha ibn Nun's relationship more like a coach or a mentor that he took along with his for his journey, an assistant for him, right? And then there's some more, stronger authority relationships like Zulaykha had over, Yusuf alayhi salam. Or Yusuf alayhi salam eventually was a minister, so he has a relationship with his employees, these young employees, right? But in all of these cases, there's a power dynamic. Somebody's in a position of power and influence and authority, and somebody has now surrendered to that and say, whatever you tell me to do, I will do, right? And there are three different scenarios here. So look at these different scenarios. You've got Musa alayhi salam, who's a great teacher. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a direct student, personal assistant to Musa alayhi salam? It's an honor to be in that position, right? So you have a great mentor in this case, personally. And then you have another scenario in which you have a terrible person in authority over you. What story is that? It's the story of Yusuf alayhi salam and the wife of the minister. He's her fata. He has to do what she tells him to do. Go clean this, go get that, go cook this, go make that, go talk to this person, go there. He's just, every day, he's just sami'na wa ata'na to what she says. You understand? That's his life. Now, what is Allah teaching us in these scenarios? Perhaps Allah is teaching us that sometimes young people end up under the influence of someone who's not suited for influence. Sometimes you end up in a job where your manager is terrible. Sometimes you end up in a class where your teacher is a tyrant. Does it happen or no? Sometimes you're in a sports team, you're in the wrestling team, you're in the basketball team, and the coach hates you because you're Muslim. Might happen in Chicago all the time, possibly. Okay. You may be in a situation where the person above you, the person who has sway over you, authority over you, is your employer, is in some position of leadership above you, and you're just a young person. You're supposed to be learning from them and surrendering yourself to them and be humble to them. They are not the right person to be in that position. Or you could be lucky and very fortunate that you're in a situation where the mentor above you is someone like Musa alayhi salam. Isn't it? Now the thing is, if you have a tyrannical mentor, what are they going to do? They're going to try to break your moral principles. They're going to try to break you. You could end up, for example, in university in a class, like I ended up in a philosophy class, where I was at the time, I was young and stupid. Not like this generation. You guys are young and smart. I was young and stupid. But I would challenge my philosophy professor all the time, instead of just staying quiet. And the professor made it a mission to just put me in my place. And he wanted to kind of beat the Islam out of me, right? With debate or with, conundrums and things like that, right? But what are they trying to do? They're seeing your principles as a problem. And they want to break that down from you through what they consider mentorship, right? Isn't that what Zulaykha is doing to Yusuf alayhi salam? Right? That's what she's doing. And so it could be that there are people in a position of authority over you, and if you are truly a fata, in the spiritual sense of the word, even the mentor will not have sway over you. You'll be able to draw a line. You'll be able to say no. You'll be able to stay in service and yet not be in surrender. Right? He still serves her, he's still her servant. And even after this incident happened, by the way, he was still her servant. When she invited all those ladies, and she said, let me demonstrate, who did she call? Yusuf alayhi salam. And he didn't say, you shaitani woman, I'm never coming to listening to you again. No, he still works for her. He still had to come out. He's still in the same job. He is in service, but he's not in surrender. That's one lesson. The other lesson is, what kind of mentor should you pick? So Allah chose the case study of the ideal mentor is Musa alayhi salam, right? What's amazing about this story is that halfway through the story, until the halfway point, Musa alayhi salam had a fata. He had a fata. And for all practical purposes, in the second half of the story, he became the fata. He has a mentor now. He's the one being corrected. The first half of the story, he's getting upset with his student for making a mistake. In the second half of the story, he's afraid that his teacher is going to be upset with his mistake. What does that teach you about finding the right mentor? You want to find someone who's a lifelong learner themselves. The right mentor for you, the ideal mentor for you, is not someone who says, I've already reached the top knowledge, the top expertise, I'm already number one, let me help you get there. The thing you're learning from them is actually learning itself. They're constantly learning, they're constantly growing. They're not obsessed with the place they've reached. They want to travel to the ends of the earth, in this case quite literally, get to where the ocean, unnamed places on the earth, just so they can learn more and grow more. Just so they can enhance themselves. That is an inspiration. That is the kind of mentor you should have. People that are constantly pursuing growth. That's the second case scenario. But then there's a third case scenario also. I find this actually really beautiful, that Yusuf alayhi salam, who had a terrible mentor himself, eventually was in a position of authority where he used to be a fata, but now he has an army of fityan, plural, under him, right? And it's as if Allah put him in that position to help that society, in that before he was in a position of authority, it was women like her that were mentors. And if you have those kinds of mentors, what's going to happen to the next generation? You're going to groom them into corruption. Yusuf alayhi salam, his job is not only to save Egypt from economic corruption. His job is to save Egypt also from social corruption, moral corruption, spiritual corruption. And so in his place as a leader, Allah even hinted at the fact that young people were directly under his leadership. And he told them to go pack the bags. This is a subtle reference, but it's pretty powerful. It's pretty powerful. And it's also, this time, by the way, let me ask you, in this second part, when Yusuf alayhi salam tells his servants to fill the bags, is he got a one-on-one relationship or a one-on-many relationship? This is one on many, because it's not always possible to have what? A one-on-one relationship. Sometimes you have to have a one-on-many relationship. There are Sahaba in the life of the Prophet ﷺ who have a very one-on-one relationship with Rasulullah ﷺ. And then there are Sahaba later on in the seerah who it's not possible for them to have a one-on-one relationship with him. It's not possible for them. They still have a relationship with him, but it's not a one-on-one, it's a one-on-many relationship. And you say, no, until I have a one-on-one, I don't even care. No, wait. There are different formats of finding a mentor, finding someone to learn from. But you need to find someone. If the one-on-one is not possible, the one-on-many will be possible. And it's whatever opportunity you get, you jump on it. You take it as quickly as you possibly can. Okay. So having said all of that, I just wanted to wrap this discussion up and open up more of this for your questions. But the thing that I find just really beautiful about the use of this word and the scenarios Allah has given us is actually a reflection on what young people will find themselves in today. First of all, and by the way, the great example of the singular fata who doesn't even have friends to back him up is Ibrahim alayhi salam. Right? Fatan yuqalu lahu Ibrahim. Right? A young boy, a young man, I think they call him Ibrahim. Who did this to our idols? It was a young man. I think they call him Ibrahim. Right? And we identify ourselves as the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam, which means we identify ourselves with the religion of a young man who stood up to an entire society. He stood up and he was able to silence, with his intelligence, with his strategic response, he was able to silence the many. And by the way, they underestimated him. In the ayah, Amanta min al-la'ibin, right? They said, this kid is talking about our gods. Are you serious? Or, you're just kidding. You're just a kid. It's just a kid. Let him, kids do crazy things. Actually, the story is telling us that the majority of society thinks of young people as weak. And they think of them as something to be underestimated, something to be molded whichever way they decide. And from among them an Ibrahim rises that shakes that entire society to its core. And they can't believe the fact that it was a young person, so they had to say fatan. Right? They had to mention the word. They didn't just say, I think there was a guy named Ibrahim. No, there was a young man named Ibrahim. His youth had to be mentioned. Had to be mentioned. And this is an illustration of how powerful youth actually are. You guys, especially, I see a lot of young faces here today. You guys are in a very serious, living in a very serious time in history, and Allah chose you to be the fitya of this age. Allah chose you for that. And what that means is you were supposed to be born and you don't even know a time where TikTok and Instagram didn't exist. You were supposed to be born in the age of social media. You were supposed to be born in the age of mass information and disinformation. You were supposed to be born in the age of the exposure of mega corporations and politically changing climates. You were supposed to be born in the age of everybody's arguing with everybody, right? You were chosen to be born in this age. Nothing Allah does is by accident. And let's go back to the original definition of a fata. Someone who stands their ground, someone who makes mature decisions, someone who doesn't sway from one way to the other. There is an expectation from Allah that all of you are going to rise to the occasion. If you think this is an age of fitna like no other, then Allah has raised a generation with potential strength like no other. Allah would not allow a large problem to be created while not at the same time creating an equally or even stronger solution. And the stronger solution is actually the young people. It is actually the youth. So I don't want to give you an empty platitude kind of buzzword, we have to support our youth and our youth are the hope of the ummah and blah, blah. You've heard enough of that stuff. I want to have real talk with you. Young men and women here need to decide what kind of life they're going to live. Either you're going to understand your role in this life as something bigger than yourselves. It's not, the world doesn't revolve around you. You can no longer survive living on main character syndrome, right? If you need to keep hearing lectures about your personal healing for the next 20 years, then Allah will replace you with someone else. Because trauma is a part of life. Difficulty is a part of life. Aggression is a part of life. Having difficult family members, congratulations, every prophet had them. Name one prophet that had a functional family situation. Nuh alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam's dad, Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers, Rasul sallallahu alayhi salam's uncles, right? There's a lot of toxicity to go around. But they not only survive, they thrive. They thrive in the middle of difficult situations. So the idea that somehow you are supposed to be crumbled by the difficult situations you find yourself in is a lie that is being fed to you by people that don't want you to realize the strength you actually have. You're denying yourself the self-assurance, the self-confidence that you actually contain within yourself. And you keep doubting yourself. When you come to speakers like me or others and you say, how do you know what to do with your life? I asked myself when I was 18, 17 years old, I never asked myself that question. I thought that if one of my friends said, I don't know what to do with my life, I'd take him to the side, smack him across the face and say, do you now know? He says, yes, I understand. Not that I want to slap you, but maybe you need to slap yourself a little bit. Maybe you need to stop being so unsure of yourself. It's clear what Allah has made you good at. It's clear what potential you have. It's clear to you. Pursue it. And if you fail, pursue something else. Why are you so afraid of failure? Why are you so afraid of pushing new boundaries? Why are you so hell-bent upon being different from the past generation, but at the same time, you're so concerned about being like every other dumb teenager? You want to be unique, but there's nothing unique about being a copier and a copycat. Why do you want to be like everybody else? I actually didn't even mention one glimpse, one last thing about youth in the Quran that I find amazing. Unexpected place in the Quran. Yusuf alayhi salam was in jail, you know that, right? وَدَخَلَ مَعَهُ السِّجْنَ فَتَيَانِ. Could have been mujriman, could have been rajulan. Two criminals entered jail with him. Two men entered jail with him, right? What did Allah say? Two young men entered jail with him. Is that strategic from Allah or no? Is that deliberate? Why is Allah wanting me to realize these guys are fatayan? Why? Because they're in jail, they're around all kinds of people. They're around gang leaders, they're around hardened criminals, they're around intimidating people, right? And if you know anything about the jail environment in the ancient times and now, you form groups and cliques in order to survive, and you conform and you belong, and that's how you can survive. And these two young men are clearly influenced by who? Yusuf alayhi, another fata. He's young also, right? He's young also, and these two young men are influenced by him. Are they influenced by him because he's giving eloquent speeches and he's getting up there and firing the crowd up and that's why they got influenced by him? Or, what is so influential in jail about a young man who entered jail? They see he carries himself differently, he talks differently, he walks differently, he eats differently, he sleeps differently, he treats the elders differently, he deals with ignorant people differently, he controls his temper differently. I've never seen anyone my age act that mature. Bro, what is it that you have for breakfast? You got something going on that I want a part of. And when I have a problem, I know who to talk to. I want to talk to this young man. Why am I giving you this example? Because every one of the youth here, every young person is surrounded by friends and others. And there's this obsession in the world with being an influencer today. Youth influencers. And the way to become an influencer is turn a camera on. That's how you become an influencer. Look at the idea of two people that are actually influenced so much that they ended up committing crime and they ended up in jail. So they're clearly under negative influences in life. And all of a sudden, with no speeches, no propaganda, no marketing campaign, they come under the influence of another inmate in jail without him even opening his mouth. How? There's something unique about people that are influenced by Allah's message. When young people are truly indoctrinated by the revelation, by the wahi that Allah has given, by the guidance that Allah has given,
then they become natural influencers. Then they become role models even for the most criminal elements of society. You don't go to them, they come to you. They come to you and say, hey, can you help me out here? I saw this dream. It's actually pretty amazing that Allah does that. Because it's not just about you. You need to help redirect an entire generation of humanity, a young generation of humanity, in the right direction. And it's not going to come from empty presentations. It's going to come from you carrying yourself differently. You need to be more serious about your career. You need to be more serious about marriage. You need to be more serious about your financial responsibilities. You need to become more serious about how you manage your time. You need to become serious about your health. You need to become more serious about balancing everything in your life. You need to be more serious about the elders in your family and taking care of them and taking care of the young and being a good older brother and older sister to your younger brother and sister. You need to get serious about all of that stuff, and all of a sudden you're a kind of young person that's not absorbed in, you know what they said to me? He's so annoying, my little brother's so annoying. You're supposed to be his mentor, he's supposed to be your fatah. He's annoying, you're his murabbi, actually. You keep saying, who do I learn from? They're already learning from you. They're already learning from you. Rise to the occasion. So I leave you with this. This is something personal, but I'll leave you with it. I was 19 years old. I was in the Muslim Center of New York. I still remember this like it was yesterday. And I was talking about how I don't understand because I was studying some Quran, and I had been listening to khutbahs for since early age. And I was like, I never understood a khutbah. They never talk about the Quran and they never explain it. And why don't they do that? And I was just complaining. I was a 19-year-old angry. Why doesn't the masjid do this? Why doesn't the masjid do that? Why doesn't the masjid have youth programs? I was sitting there complaining. And I remember Mahan Bhai, an older brother to me, he was listening to me. He doesn't even remember he did this. He just grabbed me by the arm and he shook me. And he said, if you can't find the man, be the man. And he just let me go. And I was like, whoa. And that doesn't mean I became the man the next day. But I said, the first realization to me was, I'm not the man. Am I even a man? I need to become a real man and then become the man, because men don't sit and complain. Men don't sit and whine about what's not going right. Men do. Men solve. Men fix. And when they see a problem, it's too big for them to solve. They say, well, how do I develop the skills, the strength, the strategy, the tools, the ability to solve that problem? And you know what? Until I develop that, and I'm working day and night to develop that, I'm not going to talk about the problem. Because talking about it is not the solution. Building myself up to be able to solve that problem is the solution. There's a mentality that's needed. There's a psychology that's needed, that I need the young men and women of this society to develop. And it's not just about be the man, it's also be the woman, by the way. Right? We have to stop, and I know I said I'll end, it's hard for me to end. I'll talk to the elders for a moment. Stop calling your young men and women your kids. Stop. They're not your kids. They're your son is a young man. He's not your child. Your daughter is a young woman. She's not a girl. When you say we gotta get our kids married, please don't get kids married. Men get married. Women get married. Kids are not supposed to get married. Okay? We have to decide what's best for the kids. The thing with kids is, you're right. You should decide what's best for kids. But if you raised a man, he knows what's best for him. He can figure it out. And he can make decisions like a man makes decisions. A woman is supposed to be independent. That same man and woman, if they cut a red light, you're not going to go to the judge and say, my kid, the judge is going to get out of here. He has to face the trial. If that same young man, by Allah's decree, if a young man dies, his parents are not going to come and answer his questions. He's answerable to Allah himself. In the court of law in this world, in the court of Allah, they are men and they are women. So stop in your head thinking they are kids. By no definition are they kids. And treat them as adults. They are your children originally, but they're not your property. They're your amana. they're your amana. And so much of the crisis of this ummah is because we are not letting grown men be men. They're still being talked to like they are boys. And they have accepted that for themselves. They can be men everywhere else, but when they come in the family, they're boys again. No, this is sick, it's disturbed, it's not Islam. Whoever told you that's Islam, that's not Islam. Islam is Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If you think parents have authority over children, imagine the authority Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had over the Sahaba. And what is the analogy in the Quran? Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is told, "Tarahum, what is it? فَمَثَلُهُمْ كَمَثَلِ زَرْعٍ أَخْرَجَ شَطْأَهُ فَآزَرَهُ فَاسْتَغْلَظَ فَاسْتَوَى عَلَى سُوقِهِ." He is the farmer who grows a plant so strong that it can stand on its own. So the Sahaba can be independent decision makers. That's the great accomplishment of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Shouldn't that be the great accomplishment of a parent? I've raised a young man and a young woman who can make independent, mature decisions. I've helped develop a real fata. I developed a real fata. We take that away from them. We think we know what's best for them. We want to question every turn they make. Your children, your sons and daughters may make stupid decisions. They may make stupid, but that might be a real commentary on what kind of independence you taught them to begin with. We need to let men be and let women be.